I'll be reading from Romans chapter 8, verses 28 and 29. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, and that he might be the firstborn among many brothers.
Hold your finger there at Romans and flip over to Isaiah, because we're going to be looking at Isaiah 41 as well. We'll be looking at both of those passages. But I want you to think about how much of your life is spent waiting, particularly doctors. I had a doctor's appointment once for 10 o'clock in the morning. At 11, I was escorted into an exam room, and at noon, the doctor finally came in. How many of us, if we have a meeting for lunch, say at noon, if it gets to be 12, 12:15, 12:30, we start to get a little impatient? Some might even get patient before then. Anybody ever driven in Southern California? I lived there. You had to deal with SoCal traffic. That's what we have, SoCal and NoCal. Southern California, Northern is NoCal. And 3 or 4 lanes of traffic, and it's just sitting. You could open a used car lot sitting there. And I remember one time going down to LAX. It was about, that's the big airport out there. It was about 6:37 in the morning, and traffic is just stopped dead. And I turned on the radio, and they said, oh, there's construction at a certain mile marker. And I got down after about 30 minutes to that mile marker, which was only about 2 miles away. There's 3 guys over here tightening the bolts on a safety rail. That was the construction. And we still weren't moving. Now, if you've been there, I've been through Chicago and Houston, some of the largest cities in America, and you can get very impatient very quickly there. How many of us have had to spend time looking for a job? Maybe not just any job, but the right job. And we take months maybe to find it. And here's one. Anybody ever been there? We all been there? Most of us been there, done that? I've got some friends that are my age and maybe about that much older than me. And they're still over here waiting for the perfect woman. That actually looks like one of them, I think. But we have to wait sometimes. Waiting is a fact of life. And here's one that many wait for. How many do you know, or some of you maybe, you married someone with the idea, I'm going to change him, or I'm going to change her. And I find this a lot with people who are Christians who are marrying someone who's not a Christian. That's why I tell you, if your faith is at all important to you, and you want your children to grow up in that faith, don't marry outside of it. I might be preaching to the choir here, but you all know folks that maybe are at that point where they want to marry, but they don't stop to think about what am I going to do with the kids? What are you going to do with this husband maybe who drinks a lot or who cusses like the proverbial sailor or a truck driver? Oh, he'll change after we're married. Whoa, wait a minute. If he's not changing now, what makes you think he's going to change then? And if he's not a Christian or she's not a Christian, what are you going to do when the kids come along and the boy says, oh, Mommy, why is Daddy not going to church? How come I have to go? Or how come, Dad, we're going to church but Mom's staying home? You see, don't do it based on a promise that's probably not going to happen. So I want to talk about some of these situations where we find ourselves waiting. And sometimes we are in God's waiting room. In other words, we're waiting on God to answer a prayer for us. And those times we end up in God's waiting room, or when God's telling us, I want you to wait here, while things work out to where he'll answer a prayer. And when we're waiting on God, it could be for maybe a few minutes, a few weeks, and that could turn into months, years, where we are waiting on God. And the Bible provides several instances of people who've had to wait on God. Moses is a classic example. Moses was 40 years shepherding before God brought him to leadership. That's quite a while, isn't it? Anybody ever wait for a promotion that long? It's quite a while. Moses was waiting. Waiting on the Lord is just a fact of life. We all have to do it, and this is where we start to develop patience. Now, I've said, kind of half jokingly, but there's some seriousness to it, I quit praying for patience. Because usually that's when something would go wrong, that I had to write it out. And I just want patience right now. And that's a lesson I'm trying to teach my kids sometimes. And you parents, you know what I mean, when they want a gift, there's a toy at the store they want, and you say, wait a minute, your birthday's coming up in 2 weeks. Now, translate that into 7-year-old, that might as well be 20 years from now. Or Christmas is coming. And we're trying to teach them to wait. Or maybe, I'll tell you what, you save, and I'll match every dollar you save for this. It'll take a month or two. And that's still going to be a long time. But here's what Isaiah said. I think I said 41. I meant chapter 40. Those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall soar up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not grow weary. They shall walk and not faint. Now, when I first learned this many years ago, I learned it in song. That's the first time I ever came across this passage. You might have sung it at devotionals. And the folks that taught me this song added a line to it that said, teach me, Lord, to wait. Wait on the Lord. Be of good courage, we're told in the Psalms. And he shall strengthen thine heart. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Notice he repeats it. Now, in English, modern English, when we write, we punctuate. I can put all capital letters. I can put an exclamation point at the end of the sentence. I can underline it, and that way you know this is important. Well, they didn't have any of that in the Hebrew or Greek of the Bible, so they would repeat. That's one of the ways they would show you what was important, is they would repeat it. So you can see he says twice here, wait on the Lord. This is important, is what he's saying. Pay attention. You're going to have to wait. And then also in the Psalms we're told, rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes. Notice again, rest in the Lord. Wait patiently. So I want to talk about this. God's waiting room. When I'm having to wait on God to provide a job or to answer a prayer, and it's just an undeniable truth of life, we have to wait on God. And this is where it can get a little bit tricky for us sometimes. You see, any number of things can cause us to have to wait. There are changes in our lives. Transition. When you maybe change jobs. Maybe you're a little time between jobs. When you move. A life-altering event or tragedy. You know what the most stressful thing anybody can go through in life is? The death of a spouse. That's the most stressful, heaviest stressor that any of us can face. New job is also up there, and moving. Those are I forget the exact order, but those are the top 3 stressors you can face in life. And then sometimes you get a wake-up call to a life change. This is the husband or the spouse who's maybe abusive, they're an alcoholic, and the other spouse takes the kids and says, bye, we're going until you straighten up. That's an attention getter. And then it can be maybe God's trying to just tell you to rest. Maybe it's a time of refinement, but whatever, you got to remember that whatever brought you to this moment in God's waiting room, it's got a purpose. There's a reason why you're having to wait. And in Romans chapter 8 that we just had read a minute ago, notice he says, we know that all things work together, and there's a reason why I emphasize it that way, for good for those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. This is one of those verses, when I make my list of misused and misquoted and misapplied scriptures, this one's in the top 2 or 3. Because this gets quoted sometimes as saying, well, the Romans says all things are happen for the good. No, that's not what it says. Or it says all things are good. No, that's not what it says. But doesn't Romans say good comes out of all things? No, that's not what it says. We know that all things work together. All things, that's the good, that's the bad, and the in-between. And in a minute we'll look at verse 29, because you have to read verse 29 with this in context in order to understand what he's talking about. The verse is really saying God's using all things, whether we perceive them to be good or bad, for his ultimate glory. Have you ever thought about how something that appears or is good puts you on a trail to disaster? Oh, I just won a free cruise. That's great. You get down there into the Caribbean, and next thing you know, you're in a storm. Well, the cruise was good. The storm, not so much. But what he's telling us, God can use heartache, tragedy, whatever, redemptively. He can take the good and the bad and use it to his glory and for another reason that we'll look at here in just a minute. No matter what gets thrown our way, we gotta trust in God, and we gotta be patient and wait in God's waiting room. He's bigger and better than any of the problems and tougher than any of the problems that life can throw at us. That's where we have to remember many times that there are a lot of things we can't control in this world. Now look at verse 29. For whom he foreknew, he predestined to be conformed, watch this, to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. There is why God uses all things to work together. So we'll be more in the image of Jesus. Did Jesus have everything go smooth for him? I seem to remember a few times there the Pharisees tried to take him before his time. John 11, when he raised Lazarus up, they wanted to not only kill him, they wanted Lazarus. And then he finally goes to the cross. See, there's a mixture of good and bad things that are going to happen to us in life. God can bring us through these times of adversity. Now, if you've ever been in a storm, it feels like you're in it forever until it finally quits. And you can get back to smoother sailing. And sometimes, what's the great line? Sometimes God calms the storm, other times he lets the storm rage and he calms us. There's no denying that this world, we also have choices we have to make. And those lead to consequences, which can be good or they can be bad. And stop and think about it, how little in this world we control. I can't control the decisions that anybody else makes. Yesterday, on the highway, it pretty much rained all the way from Middle Tennessee to here to just past Terre Haute. And it was pouring down sometimes, and the mist and fog that trucks kick up and vehicles kick up when they're going into heavier. I couldn't see from much further from here to that wall in some places. I can't control the laws of physics and motion. If I hit a slick spot and I go off into the ditch, or if another car slides out of control, I can't control any of that. That's where we're just trusting God. That's where we're trusting the Lord to keep us safe as we're going through these times. And even in good weather, I can't control the cars and the motorcycles and everything that are just zipping in and out of traffic. That's where we have faith. Let me ask you, here's the one place we exercise faith. What guarantee do you have that any new car that you purchase is going to last? What's everybody laughing at? I hear snickers out there. You don't, do you? It's an example of faith, isn't it? Even if that car is brand new and there are 0 miles on it, or the house you're buying is brand new, you're buying it straight from the builder, what guarantee do you have that that's going to be a sound structure? You're exercising faith, aren't you? Even an atheist exercises faith. I was in a Facebook discussion about this very issue several years ago. And atheists will always say that they don't have faith in anything. And at the time, I had a trip coming. I don't remember where the trip was to, but it was by air. And I said, well, I've got this trip planned. I've bought the tickets. We have the reservation. We got our hotel, got everything set up. And I said, right now, that's faith, because I don't know if it's going to get here. I could get sick. Any number of things could happen. But until that trip is behind me, it's just faith. And he came back and said, well, that's not faith. That's just a reasonable expectation. I thought, okay, tomato, tomato. I call it faith. You call it a reasonable expectation. We're on the same level here. We're believing, and we're also, keep in mind, believing based on evidence that I'm going to be able to make that flight. Why? Well, we've had flight for years. Southwest or Delta or whatever airline I'm on. They've got their planes flying right now. I've got evidence that I'm going to be able to make this, but right now it's faith. You see what I'm getting at? Everything in the future is faith. And everything is going to be based on what we base it on evidence that God has acted for us in the past and will continue to act for us. Look again in Romans chapter 8. All things work together. Think about it. I may be going through a bad patch right now. Maybe I've been out of work for a year, unemployment's run out, and I just don't know where I'm going to be able to pay my bills. But this is where I've got to remember this is going to work with the good things that happen so that God can make me more in the image of His Son. No matter what the situation is, God is going to bring us through it. When I visit church members, especially those that are in the hospital, they got medical issues, many times medical people are amazed at how well this patient's doing. But this is a patient that is given to prayer. This is a patient that is as a Christian for many years, and they're at peace. And I've seen many people who aren't Christians who fret and worry a lot. I think I can see why Christians a lot of times do better with crises. It's because of their faith. We have to remember God is still God. God can see tomorrow, I can't. God can see next week. He knows what's coming down the pike for the future. I don't. And this is where I have to allow God to work and have trust, which takes us to faith in being in God's waiting room. This is where a lot of prayer, a lot of patience comes in. Spiritual growth. Anybody ever played sports? How do you get yourself ready to be the starting linebacker or the starting pitcher? Don't you have to go into the weight room and lift the weights? Do the exercise? How many have done that and the next morning rolled out of bed and felt like they'd been in a car accident? Stiff, sore, but that's how you grow, isn't it? Get out there. You can only watch so much film and read so much before. You got to get out there and start throwing that football around and build your strength up. How do we build faith? Well, we got to exercise it, which means we have to step out and pray and turn things over to the Lord to handle. How do we build patience? Well, we got to go through tribulation. I can't just say, God, give me patience, and poof, there they are. I've got to work it out. I've got to exercise those patience. Look at the fact, speaking of, James, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials. Okay, James, what are you saying? I'm supposed to be happy that I've lost my job and I can't make the house payment and and the doctor has got bad news from my test result? No, that's not what he's saying. Read on. Knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing. The testing of your faith produces patience. This is how we build it. This is how we strengthen ourselves. Waiting. This is how we're going to be made stronger. Waiting is how we're going to sit back and just see what God can do and see God work. And God is using these things for our good. I don't see it now. How many of us when we were kids, when mom or dad said, well, no, you can't go to this party, you can't do this activity, and we would argue with them, but they said, look, trust me. This is for your own good, that you're not being allowed to do this or that you're having to do that. And at the time we thought, what does mom and dad know? Right? As we get older, our parents get smarter, right? But as a teenager, I didn't get it. And sometimes don't we do the same thing with God? I've been praying to God for fill in the blank, whatever it is, a spouse, a job, some answer to prayer. And I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I'm not seeing it. Remember, God's got things going on that we don't know about. We have to remember that. James says when we face these trials, this can refer to two things. Number one, the types of trials, when he talks about the trials we face. Number two, he might be talking about the source of those trials. What types of trials do we face? Well, how about financial? Do we face medical, physical? How about trials at work? How many of us have had a coworker that we've had to work with that was just the most obnoxious human being that ever walked the face of the earth? Or a bad boss? Those are the types of trials we might deal with. And then there's the source. Life in general. When the car breaks down, $2,000 on a new transmission that I don't have. There's just life happening. Remember, we can't control the events and people around us. So that guy that runs the red light while I'm coming through the intersection, I have no control over that. There's just life in general. Another source of trials could be because we're Christians. Now, we like to think we have persecution in this country, but go to a country where you're being a Christian could get you in jail or could cost you your life. We get those sources of persecution. We might get a joke at work or something. Now, I don't know what's coming down the pike in the future. We could have that problem here one day. But that's one place we could get the source of trials. And when we're going through trials, we might just have to sit in God's waiting room for a while. Look at Matthew chapter 8, where the centurion, remember the centurion, he's not a Jew, he's a Roman, he's got a sick servant. He wants Jesus to come heal him, but then he goes to Jesus and says, just say the word, my servant will be healed. And Jesus said, whoa, I haven't seen this kind of faith anywhere in Israel. I wonder how his disciples felt that this Roman is getting complimented by Jesus for having great faith. Wait a minute, Jesus, what about me? But wait a minute, you guys have been with Jesus for all this time, and you're still having faith issues. But this Roman, who's heard about him, has right away seems to have faith. I don't know what he knew about Jesus. He's one of those characters that just appears and then goes. But he had enough faith, however much he'd heard about Jesus, he had enough faith to say, hey, just say the word. You don't even have to come to my house. I'm not even worthy for you to be here in the first place. And Jesus, or my servant, will be healed. He's showing that Jesus has authority over all things. Jesus had the authority there to cure his servant, and he did. He could have said no. But he cured this servant. That is a statement of faith in Jesus. Marvel. One of the translations, I think it's the Old King James, says Jesus marveled. Jesus was, surprised at this. But God has got things under control. Doesn't look like it, does it? Look at all the chaos going on in the world. But God's got it. God has got it under control. And this is where we've just got to be about our business, basically. There's a lot of things that go on that irritate me, that get me angry, that make me sad and all. But the bottom line is we got to be telling people about Jesus, because in the end, that's all that's going to matter, is whether or not your name is in the book of life. We got to remember, too, that when we forget to call on God, that can lead to a crisis in faith. That should be the first thing we do when we have a problem, is to call on God. Despite God being big and powerful, a lot of times we forget that. We'll call everybody, we'll get the cell phone out whenever we got a problem, and we're going down the list calling everybody. But we forget about God. And Jesus uses this moment to remind us that this kind of faith is what will separate disciples from the rest. We used to say to separate men from the boys. But that's what this is going to do. I wonder if any of his disciples or any of the Jews there could have done the same thing this Roman did. Don't worry about coming into my house, Lord. Just say the word and my servant will be healed. My child will be, or whatever. Whatever the prayer is that they have. I've wondered how many of them could have done that. Faith crisis comes when I forget who's got ultimate control and ultimate authority. When I forget that God is in control. Meanwhile, I'm pacing back and forth trying to figure out how am I going to fix this problem. And I forget there's the things that I can't have any control over. This can come at a moment's notice sometimes, when we just get hit between the eyes with bad news. And sometimes recognizing the true authority of God when we're in a tight spot is the hardest thing to do. That is one of the toughest aspects of faith. Faith isn't always easy. But we have to remember that God will answer prayers. Those who wait will see that faithfulness. We got to remember this too, that no is every bit an answer as yes is. Anybody listen to country music? Garth Brooks, years ago, had a song that said, "Thank God for unanswered prayers." Well, there's no such thing as an unanswered prayer. We get it. Yesterday we had breakfast at Cracker Barrel, and my daughter goes over and picks up a little stuffed animal and says, "Daddy, will you buy this for me?" I told her no. Now, she made a request. Did she get an answer? Yeah. Was it the answer she wanted? No. When we ask God for something and it's a no, didn't we get an answer? We got the answer. Was it the answer we wanted? Well, no, it's not. But it is an answer. Sometimes God is also going to want us to wait a while. But we'll see the faithfulness of God if we wait. If we don't try to take things into our own hands. And one principle we really need to learn in our Christian walk is God's faithfulness. Remember, our vision is limited. I can only see right now what's going on in this room. I can't see the road out there. I know, a car just went by. I could probably tell you if there was a train going. Number one, we'd hear it. Number two, the cars are lined up. But I can't see much more than that. There could be kids out there playing in the yard. I don't know. I can't see them. God can see it. God can see tomorrow. God can help us through many of these troubles, but we get so wrapped up in what's happening now that we forget many times what God has already done for us, don't we? We forget that God got me through my illness last year. God got me through my unemployment. God got us through our family or marital crisis. We forget those things. We look at right here, right now. Our memories are a little bit short, aren't they? When we forget some things that God has done. Isaiah chapter 40, look again. "Why do you say, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel, my way is hidden from the Lord, and my just claim is passed over by my God." God's forgotten all about me. "Have you not known? Have you not heard? The everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth," watch this, "neither faints nor is weary. His understanding is unsearchable. He gave power to the weak and to those who have no might. He increases strength. Even the youth shall faint." Even the youth shall faint. How tough did you think you were when you were in your teens and 20s? Now, we always think we're invincible at that age, right? "But the youth," he says, "shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall." You know, we think we're so tough when we're young that we can do anything until we get hurt. And then we realize, maybe I'm not so tough. But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Teach me, Lord, to wait. Sometimes when it comes to lessons like that, some of us are a little bit hard-headed. I can say that because I'm one of those people. And it can take a while to learn lessons. But he says, wait. And you see the eagle with his wings spread? If you've ever watched eagles fly, they just glide along the currents effortlessly. Flap their wings occasionally, and they just glide right along. That's what we, as Christians, should be trying to do, is just glide along and let the Lord work out the situations in our lives. Notice those who are in the prime of life are going to stumble and fall. You know, we all would like to live long lives, or most of us would, I think. Sometimes we don't. Young people can be the picture of health and vitality, but an accident, an illness, can take that down. We can stumble. We can fall. We can get hurt. We have to just keep in mind, we don't know what's going to happen. People in the Bible who had to wait on God. Have you ever thought about these people? What about Daniel? What was going through his mind that night that he went into the lion's den? I wonder how long the night felt to him. Am I going to go through that, or am I going to be cat food? Now, he knew, and you can look at the dialogue between him and also the ones that were tossed into the burning furnace there in Daniel 2. You can look at them and you can see their confidence. Look, even if God decides not to get me through the lion's den, I'm going to be with the Lord. So, King, for me, it's a win-win. Either he's going to get me through this and I'm going to walk out in the morning, or I'm going to go home and be with the Lord. As he's going in thinking about these things. What about Paul? Having to wait out a storm and then he gets shipwrecked. I wonder what was going through his mind then. Especially when he's gathering up firewood and a snake suddenly grasps a hold of him. You can see there that he just shook it off. But the men that were with him saw that. What's with this guy? In a not so subtle reminder, going back to Isaiah, we've been through this before and it turned out fine then. So why do we doubt? Why are we doubting now? And if this situation works out where I take my last breath, well, I get to go be with the Lord. So win-win. I can remain here with my family and continue doing the work, or I go to be with the Lord. God is the authority. We have to trust God. We have to trust God to be faithful, recognizing his authority. When I say I'm recognizing God's authority, what am I talking about? Well, first of all, notice here, I have to let things go. Cast your burden, he says, on the Lord, and he will sustain you. This would be like a fisherman casting his line out. And look how far it goes. If you've got, say, a quarterback throwing the football for the long bomb, I'm throwing it as far away from me as I can. Or another way to look at it is if I drop something hot in your hand. Remember, did you ever play that game Hot Potato when you were a kid? Yeah, just get rid of the ball as fast as you can. That kind of thing. So cast your burdens. Get rid of them. Give them over to the Lord. And then you will see blessings in your life. Look at Psalm 65. Blessed is the man you choose and cause to approach you, that he may dwell in your courts, he may be satisfied with your goodness of your house, of your holy temple. By awesome deeds and righteousness you will answer us. Notice he says, you will answer us. O God of our salvation, you who are the confidence of the ends of the earth and of the far off seas. You see, blessed people are those who are not offended at God. They're not the ones that are gonna discard the Lord or walk away because they're hitting a rough patch. God is going to be that authority for us. We have to acknowledge God's authority. Truly, Psalm 62 says, my soul, and watch this, silently waits for God. From him comes my salvation. I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes when I've had to wait on God, I'm not that silent about it. But the psalmist says silently his soul waits for God. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be greatly moved. There's a song. I don't know if it's in our songbook or not, but I shall not be moved. Just like this. I can't remember the rest of the song. But the idea is of a rock that is solid. It's not going anywhere. And his soul is waiting, is going to be quiet while he waits. And remember, we still have to acknowledge that God is still God in all of this. And all the chaos, all the confusion, all the things that we see going wrong, God is still God. Faith isn't always easy. But that's why it's faith. How could we say we have faith in God if everything always worked out for us, that we always had plenty of money in the bank, that we always had a car that ran, that we always had a roof that didn't leak? Remember, Paul said in Philippians that he learned how to appreciate the times he had plenty to eat by going through times when he didn't. You know, I learned to know what it's like to have plenty of food by going through times when I'm hungry. I learned what it's like to and appreciate having plenty of money to meet my needs by going through times when I don't have it. And any other way you want to look at it, any other thing you want to add. God is using all things, good and bad, and in between for his glory. And even when it seems like there is nothing being done, even when we think nothing's happening, we don't know what's going on with God. We don't know what things God is putting into motion. And this is where we got to just have that trust that God gives us. So we know all things, just to recap, are going to work together. All things work together, good and the bad, for the good for those who love God, to those who are the called according to his purpose. For whom he foreknew, he predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, that we may be the firstborn among many brethren. He wants us conformed to Jesus. He wants us to be more like Jesus, so that's why these things will happen. So, we may feel like we're waiting, but God is really doing something. Maybe things are tough in your marriage or your family or with your finances. Maybe you're dreading going into the job tomorrow because of that guy in the cubicle next to you. Or maybe your other relationships or your own personal ministry. People you're trying to study the Bible with and they keep blowing you off. But you never know what God is doing. You never know what seeds are being planted. Regardless of all these things, we have to remember that God is still working. God is doing something. There is a purpose in having to be in the waiting room. There is a purpose in God having us to wait. God is intimately, actively being involved in our lives. We just have to be patient. We just have to give God room and time to work. Find rest by allowing God to work. Just dare to hope. Lamentations chapter 3. What does this passage tell us about hope? When we see, when the world seems to be just falling apart around us, where do you run? Do we run to the Lord? Or do we run to man-made solutions for all this? Take the time to evaluate the areas of your life. Take the time to find a way to sit still and be quiet and let God work. Don't get in a big hurry. There could be a very valuable lesson in all this. But then when you emerge from God's waiting room this time, it'll build you up for the next time you got to be in God's waiting room. When you are waiting for an answer to a particular prayer, waiting for something to happen. Remember, it's on God's timetable. It's not on ours. Remember that no is every bit the answer to that yes is. And also remember that when God answers a prayer, he may answer it in ways that we don't expect. But you know, if I'm expecting a package to come by UPS and FedEx delivers it, I'm not going to fuss about it. It got here, didn't it? When God answers our prayers, he may do it in a way that we're not expecting, but hey, he gave you an answer. And he might tell you no. You might just end up waiting a long time. Now, there's more to the whole idea of prayer and how it works. We might do a series on prayer here down the road somewhere. But for now, are you in God's waiting room? If we can pray with you or help you in any way, let us know. If you're not a Christian, this would be a good time to become one. If there is something we can do to help you in your walk with God and you would like to share it, we'll offer you that opportunity now as together we stand and as we sing.
I am resigned.